recording.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Three Black Guys with the Mic. We are honored to have a friend of ours to the podcast, L. Joy Williams, political strategist, advocate, radio host, podcast host, revolutionary. I can keep going and on and on and on and on and on. But most importantly, thank you so very much for joining us again back on our podcast. Let me start, L. Joy, with what have you been up to since the last time that you were on this show, which was what, in 2017?
Oh my! How
Nah,
much
we
time
no
did
no
we
no
have
no.
for
I think
that
it
part?
was.
That
It
particular.
might have been 18. It might have been 18. But
2018, 2019,
So
2017, 2018.
yeah, I'm gonna start backwards. So, most recently, in addition to, so I wear several different hats at the same time, always. And as you know, and as I've shared on the show before, I'm president of Brooklyn NAACP. Here in New York, so leading that organization, and still leading that organization here on the ground in my community organizing work, racial justice work, justice work overall. So still doing that. Most recently with my political firm, as a political strategist, we just finished an amazing congressional race for the only Black woman in the New York congressional delegation here in New York, Yvette Clarke. So we just finished her primary election with a resounding election day turnout in her favor. So, that's a check, another win in the column for me. In addition to doing Sunday Civics, which is, continuing to teach people and inspire people to take civic action where they are. So doing all of those pieces simultaneously. And that's really what I've been doing for, the past 2 years, continuing to advise and to consult candidates and organizations who are working in the political space or the community organizing space, while also doing the show to teach and inspire people to take civic action, as well as running Brooklyn NAACP.
What have you been doing during this quarantine? How have you been adjusting during the quarantine?
Well, certainly running an election, a congressional election during a pandemic was not something that I thought I would have to, ever do in my lifetime. But that was a very difficult process. But, happy that all of the team that I had put together were able to stay safe. And, we were able to put some elements to make sure that the people that we were communicating with that we wanted to vote for us, that we were also contacting and engaging with them to make sure that they were safe and providing resources and necessary. So it was a bit of, and particularly doing that for a Black woman candidate whose nature was, the care and concern for her constituents. And so that made it easy to do that. That was her focus on, before I ask somebody for a vote, or to reelect me, I need to check in with people and make sure that they are okay and have the resources that they need, and leading my colleagues in that standpoint. So that made it really easy. In terms of a family dynamic, we did have a number of deaths in our immediate family, which, is difficult, particularly with my family on my father's side, who's a very large family, and we're used to being together. All right. Like we go to each other's churches. We're, used to spending time in each other's house. We used to being hugged up, kissed up, with family. And so losing particularly the patriarch in our family during the pandemic, and not having the ability to come together and mourn together and celebrate his life together has certainly impacted us all. So, dealing with that personal narrative, my husband also lost, one of his aunts. And so managing that process. And then we had just in the beginning of the year taken in 2 new foster boys as well, 2 young boys. And so, being able to manage, that during the pandemic with all of the other external factors, and my husband being a teacher, and managing, remote teaching was definitely a challenge that I am happy and, thankful to God that we had the skills necessary to weather that, and we're still coming out of it, but thankful that we had the skills and the fortitude to be able to weather that storm.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, because I read your article, and it was saying that you took on the role of being a foster parent, plus taking care of your grandmother, with all of the things that you have going on. And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be personal in the beginning of the interview. I'm sorry. I'm just I'm just curious to know, how do you balance all of that, and what is your advice for women who take on so many different responsibilities, to be able to balance this entire motherhood, COVID, taking on, another family member? That's got to be a lot.
Yeah. I think for anyone who's sort of in that caretaking space and used to being that, we get asked the question a lot, like, how do you balance it all? And the truth be told, like, if you were really in our head, we'd be like, I don't know. I can't tell you what the magic, ingredients are that exist as to why, we are able to manage the way in which we are. Like I said, I'm just thankful that I have, one of the things is, both my husband and I agree on is that, like, we don't pray for outcomes, right? We pray that we are able to see the focus, see the goal, have the tools and the resources to be able to do what needs to be done, right? And so for me, that's always the focus, is like, do I have the resources, the tools, the support to be able to execute whatever the challenge is? And that's everything from a congressional race to the pandemic to managing a household and helping to manage other, family members. It's really not, and, yes, you need to do the things that everybody says of prioritizing yourself, because if you're not healthy, if you're not supported, then you can't do these other things as well. But that also doesn't have to be your total existence. And, some days the balance is perfect, right? Like, you have, both plates up, and balancing it well. And sometimes, other times, like, some other things take priority. So I think, I've long abandoned the desire that everything needs to be balanced perfectly, and just what am I capable of doing right now. And I still get flustered, I still get overwhelmed in that space, and that's okay. And sort of being able to be comfortable with managing that load.
At first, we offer our condolences, obviously, and we just, with respect and honor. And I do want to ask this, other question, particularly where the election is concerned and where we are. There's, there's the AOCs and the squad, if you will, or quad or whatever, Trump has tried to label them. And they're this progressive wing, kind of like the, people who were a little bit more Bernie-esque. But Joe Biden has emerged, and we are where we are. There's a level of apathy in the electorate, particularly with some of the younger people. But I guess the question is, how do people balance, like, not being totally excited or totally banged up for Joe and returning to having more Trump? Or, we got this pandemic, we got this record unemployment, we got, racial strife and civil distrust. And oh, by the way, we don't even have coins at stores anymore. I mean, I don't know how he wound up getting rid of the coins. I'm not sure how that went down. But what would be your advice as people start considering, like, do I really want to vote for Donald Trump, or do I really want to vote for Biden, or do I want to just sit out? What's your advice?
I think we've gotten spoiled in terms of into believing that we have to, in terms of the presidency, that you have to have a candidate that you can have a beer with. Because truth be told, the likelihood that you individually will get to have a beer and sit and kick it in the living room with the president of the United States is like not happening, right? Even I work in politics, and still I ain't sitting back and having a beer with the president of the United States. And so I think, and this is probably a conflation of both media and how it projects particular candidates and our political space, in the expectation expectation that the person that we need to pick as president is someone you individually particularly like, who could be your boy, who can come and hang out with you, and that's the person that you want as president. Rather than, what are the things that I think overall our country needs to accomplish? What type of leader do I want based upon the choices that exist before me? And those are two different things, right? And particularly with the presidency, where we know one is the only elected position where you don't have a direct vote, right? It's a representation vote, right? Because you vote for the candidate based upon the Electoral College that then selects the candidate, right? So like, if it's not a popular vote situation, where otherwise we would have a totally different president, right? And then, yes, it is a problem that the choices we end up being able to choose between are always not what choices you individually would have selected. Think about it. When you go to the store and you're making a choice between products, you are making a choice based upon your individual preferences, your individual values, and things of that nature. That's not the same thing as making a choice for the president. You are making who is the best candidate based upon the choices that are before me. That is how, in that political space, it works from a primary to a general standpoint. So in the primary, we had more choices, the ability for you to be able to vote on someone who more politically aligns with you. That is the purpose of a primary and process. And then once a candidate is picked from there, you go to the general election. Then you're like, who best represents my values? Not who is 100% aligned, not who is, checks all of the boxes from there, but based upon the choices I have, what is the best choice for me to make for, our economy, for our country overall, for me. Right. And I think if people think in that context, and at least that's what I try to teach on Sunday Civics, is that, yes, the choices are always going to suck. Right. Because it's not just you making the choice. It's millions of other Americans making the choice as well. So the choices are not always going to be in, who you would want. But then once we get to the election, you need to make a choice on who best represents. Because no one is going to 100% align with your political values because you are not running in that particular race. And that's the only person that shares your values in that sense.
So, and to kind of follow up, there's been a lot of talk. We had the Diddy's and all these other voices, Ice Cube, et cetera, et cetera. People are saying without a black agenda, we should withhold, or we should be cautious, et cetera. And my question is today, is this the election that the black agenda, I don't want to say trumps all other agendas, but should we be in a scenario where we can see, at least I've advocated, that something like the Lilly Ledbetter Act is de facto a portion of the black agenda, or healthcare is a portion of the black agenda, et cetera. Can we see that far, or is that too aspirational?
Every election, we should demand an agenda that speaks to your issues, and I don't see a problem, in this sense, because I know what you're talking about. In this sense, right now, people are talking about wanting a candidate that is going to put forth a black agenda. One, let's talk about who makes up that agenda and whose responsibility is for that. So yes, candidates for, particularly if you're talking about the Democratic Party and if you're talking about Biden, who have enjoyed the electoral support of a base of black voters for decades, should have an agenda that speaks to that population. They should. Right? They should have an agenda, and it's not just a criminal justice agenda, because black people care more about that. And we have varying degrees of black people and black interests, right? A black agenda includes a black economic agenda. It includes a black healthcare agenda. It includes, yes, a justice reform agenda. It includes an education agenda. All of those pieces are part of a black agenda. What are you going to do? What is part of your agenda or your issues that you are raising that are going to specifically speak to black voters who the Democratic Party, which you are running as a nominee for, and you will then be ahead of the party, what part of your agenda speaks to that population. And I don't think it's a problem for any group among Black folks to say, if you want my support, if the Democratic Party is going to continue to enjoy, this support from Black voters, that means you have to speak to our issues, and that means you have to have an agenda or the willingness to accept and help push forth an agenda that addresses these issues. None of that is a problem. What people are splitting hairs about is, well, Diddy said, take our agenda or else. They're focused on the or else, what the or else is, rather than focusing on and agreeing with, yeah, I need a candidate. I need a president that's going to have an agenda on education, justice reform, healthcare, the economy that speaks to this population of voters. So I would say, rather than focus on the or else you're going to stay home, or else you're going to support Trump, or else you're going to do that, rather than focus on that, right? And the media session on that, focus on what the agenda should be. Now, there's what the candidate and the campaign is putting forth as the agenda. And then there's also what what those particular voters that are saying what, or else are putting forth the agenda, right? So yes, Biden can have, his economic plan addresses this, his healthcare plan addresses that. And we could say, cool, it also needs to include X, Y, Z. And them having the willingness to accept and say, okay, we're going to move forward on that. So listening to Black women and saying, I hear you talking about a Black VP, but what about a Black woman Supreme Court justice, right? So that indicates that that the candidate and the campaign is actually listening and engaging with the voters they seek to represent, and the party has enjoyed support for. So I'm not mad at anybody saying or else. And because I'm not focused on the or else, I'm focused on the agenda part and what people are demanding and saying they want in terms of in order to enjoy that support. So power concedes nothing, right? So that we have to actually demand what we want. And so telling Black voters to be quiet, not talk too loud, right? Or on the or else, or not criticize Biden or the Democratic Party about what they're not doing or what they are doing in terms of whatever. Like I say, F you, I'm going to be as loud and demanding as I want, because I'm not going to be quiet in terms of what I want the presidency, the party, and the overall administration to push forward.
One real quick before Lamont jumps in. Did I just hear you say that we should definitely be looking forward to Stacey Abrams making the ticket? Is that what you said?
Listen, I am all in favor of a Black woman as vice president and Supreme Court. Don't tell me I have to choose.
Lamont's microphone isn't on just yet. He's working on that.
When Michael, before Lamont gets in, Eljoy, so you talk about, because I think that this is one of the disconnects, and I think it's extremely important. You talk about, for the agenda, okay, this is your economic agenda, but we also want X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. Who are the people that is we want this? And how do we get that part communicated to the administration or to whoever the candidate is? Because I think that a lot of people are like, oh yeah, I want this and I want that, but they don't really know how to go about that. Is that individuals picking up the phone and calling that administration, or calling their Congress, or calling their mayor, or whatever? Or is that the Congressional Black Caucus, or is that an organization that's saying, we the people also want these things? How do we communicate that to the actual candidate?
So this is a perfect opportunity for me to plug Sunday Civics. If you are a regular listener to Sunday Civics, which airs 10 a.m. on Sundays on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, or you could listen to the podcast that happens as well on Spotify, on my website, sundaycivics.org, or any of that. This is part of what I teach, right? So there are several different avenues in which one could put forth, this is the additional that I want. Right. So there are some people that are going to be part of the National NAACP and the Urban League and National Action Network that are going to push one agenda. There are other folks that, yes, are in the Congressional Black Caucus or other Black elected leadership that are going to continue to push push an agenda because they're part of the party apparatus or they're part of the congressional delegation in that regard. There are other more, leftist, more progressive groups that are going to be in the streets and protesting and saying any economic agenda needs to address any issue of the rising housing costs. And here's our 10-point plan on what needs to be included in a federal housing plan to address the rising cost of housing across the country. There'll be another group that says we are students and we have astronomical student debt, and any education plan needs to include, making college more affordable or automatically making it free. There doesn't have to be one centralized voice, and that this is the only person that can bring our agenda to the candidate and to the party. No, like there are many different entities that exist in order for you to do that. And then also understanding the structure and the apparatus on some of the things you may be advocating for is a state focus area. The president can't actually do anything about that. So that's something you should be addressing with your governor, or something you should be addressing with your state legislature or your city council or your alderman, right? And so part of that is also learning and knowing about the process in terms of the things that you want addressed, who is responsible for them. And that's one of the basis for me even doing the show. When people talk about civics now, right, they immediately go to young people. They immediately say, we need to teach civics in school because people don't know, right? But why are you going to young people when there's millions of adults who don't know what the hell they're doing either, right? And so the focus of Sunday Civics is really to talk and teach and inspire people who are making those decisions now. So you understand that dynamic, and you understand there doesn't have to be, and right, I think because we have been taught, because we've been in a deficit in terms of black folks, and that there are identified leaders that have been, the voice box for, Black people or for this particular group, we don't necessarily have to have one speaker and one voice, right? And you should reject any instance of the party, the nominee, or anybody locally, he said, that says, well, only I want to hear one centralized voice from Black people, because there is no one centralized voice for Black people.
So, L. Joy, let me ask you this question. If you can pull out your crystal ball, I think we've got like 109 days. It should be under the desk. Okay. I'm looking at all of the poll numbers. I'm reading, Donald Trump just kicked his chairperson out. I'm asking, is Rome burning? I'm asking, what's going to happen? I mean, right now we're in a global pandemic, and I think, and I also want to pair this with, and put your husband in there, him being in education and teaching, and, the threats that are coming from the White House, the threats that are coming from Betsy DeVos. And I'm so glad you said it's not 100% about just the presidency, but who's going to be in I call it his crew, because I'm like, Joe, who's in the crew? Who's going to be your Secretary of Education? Who's going to be, all of those other things, because those things affect us definitely on a certain level. So in your crystal ball, where are we in 109 days? Are we going to be okay? And how do you feel, and what's the energy that you're getting definitely from your husband on how to deal with this global pandemic in another 30 or 45 days, when some of these markets across the country, like in my hometown of Detroit, they got kids in school today. You know what I mean? Like, what's the energy that you're hearing in your house? Because, just like me and other people in my family who have educators in their home, you got to think about what's going to happen when that person comes home. Is that person going to affect me and my children or my neighbors or whatever? So it's kind of a two-parter. So if you could just give me that crystal ball and give me your position on this global pandemic and education, I'll be fine. And I'll let the smart people on the podcast, like Maynard, he can have the rest of the floor.
Listen, I try not to speak for my husband. He has his own voice, just like he tries not to speak for me. Okay. But I will say the concern as an educator, as he's had conversations with me about it, is his concern for the kids, his students, his peers, right, his colleagues, in terms of the other teachers, in terms of coming back to a space where there's so much unknown. And obviously, for my concern for his health, not only as it pertains to the pandemic in terms of him contracting COVID, but also in terms of his mental health, right, of like having to be able to perform in that type of environment. Like, what does that say to how we value their lives overall, that we are willing to send teachers, that we are willing to send students in an environment where we don't particularly know whether or not they can be safe. So that's one particular concern I have in that aspect. As it pertains in terms of will we be okay in terms of the presidential election, I would say we will be okay if we collectively work to be okay. It's not enough to look at the poll numbers and say, well, his poll numbers are declining and, he's changing staff, so he's going to lose. I don't think we should be complacent in that and sort of use polls as a barometer of what we should and shouldn't do leading up to the presidential election. I think we have to treat this and look at whether it's poll numbers or what actions the current president will take or not take in terms of this election cycle. And in order to make sure that this is a resounding success and completely rejecting his reelection, that means that we all have to work. And we all working means that we all have to make sure that people are registered and people are voting. We also need to make sure and challenge locally, because remember, yes, it's a federal election, it's a national election, but elections are administered by the state. And so what is your state process and how they will be handling voting? Have they made provisions for the pandemic? Are they scaling back polling site locations? Are you registered? Is there some other process you need to do in order to do mail-in voting? So all of that requires us to be active and on the ball to make sure that we produce a turnout necessary in order to make this a resounding success, that we will be okay. You are not okay if you are not participating in that process. The second piece is we will be okay if we also have an accurate census count number, right? Because remember, we are also doing the census count in the middle of a pandemic. And so if you have not completed your census yet, if you and your family members haven't done so, remember that after the census comes reapportionment, which means we change district lines across the country. Every state, every territory has to do this. And so will we disenfranchise our communities for the next decade, and our states and our localities not getting the resources necessary in terms of school, in terms of senior services, in terms of infrastructure? And then also, how will that impact your political voice for the next 10 years? And so if we do not fully participate in the census, you are basically saying, if you don't complete the census, you're basically saying you don't exist here. And so therefore, there's no money for you to exist here. And therefore, your political voice doesn't exist, because there will be a district drawn that doesn't include you in it because you did not participate. So all of those things are necessary, which means that you have to be an active participant in order for us to be okay.
Gotcha. So wait a minute, hold up, Maynard. And I want to make sure I'm clear, because I want to make sure I didn't drop this ball. Did Three Black Guys with a Mic, did we not send you a congratulatory something? Because I think the last time we were together, you weren't married, were you?
Oh, no, I think
we never said congratulations. And I think that's a super cool thing that you did, because if I remember, it's clicking now. I remember the Superfly pictures that you put on Facebook. I was like, yo, she got married. So on behalf of the Three Black Guys, congratulations on your marriage. Tell your husband, I really appreciate him in that educational piece, because that's definitely important. Male teachers are needed so bad across this country. So I just wanted to put that 2 cents in, and I'm done.
Okay. And I will just add, on that census piece, I'm telling you, this is really, really important. If you haven't already, I know you got a mailer at your house and you have no idea where that is right now. That's cool. If you go to my2020census.gov, you can fill it out online. It takes less than, it takes about like 5 to 7 minutes. And, that will help shape our future for the next decade.
I just finished it just 2 seconds ago, just when you said it. I just did it. It's done. See how fast that was?
I converted another person. I'm done for the day.
So I got a question.
Go ahead, man.
I got a question for you. Finally, we are starting to hear, or there has been some unique voices, larger voices than the normal, starting to discuss the idea that maybe the Electoral College isn't the right way. I think one of the more frequent things I continue to hear is Chris Hayes and his. There's a promo on MSNBC. He says, why don't we just vote for the president like we do everything else? So where are we at? What are your thoughts on something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, anytime, we as Americans have the ability to change our structure at any given time. At first, we didn't even vote for the president. The senators did, right? And then we changed that process because it no longer served us. And the same thing with picking our senators in general. State legislatures used to do that. And then we were like, okay, we'll change that and, the people will vote. So, for us, as there are other people that call us a young country. We have the ability, as we the people, to determine what is the best structure in the apparatus for, our electoral system or our political system to best represent the people. And I think if we come together, and there is a growing amount of people that are saying that Electoral College is antiquated, is no longer representative of how we want our country to move forward and select a leader, then we need to do that. And then we put up another apparatus in place that allows equity across the states and population to be able to pick the president. That's whether for a popular vote or weighted vote, whatever. But I believe in the power of we the people and us coming together and deciding, well, this no longer works for us. The same way that I think the way in which certain elections procedures be like, this no longer works for us, so we should change it. We should have online voter registration system. This no longer works for us. The way that we police is no longer works. There are too many deaths, or there are too many abuses. There are too many mistrusts in government. So we want to change this completely. Maybe we don't want to have police respond to a homelessness issue and try to disperse it. Maybe we have somebody else respond in that aspect. We the people can help decide that. And I would say that in politics and in general in government, there are many things that are changed in a number of different ways that nobody challenges, except when it comes to adding more people to the franchise or giving people more voice. And so I say, in terms of the Electoral College piece, if there is, and there seems to be, a growing amount of people who are like, yes, let's change this to be more reflective, because we actually enfranchised more people since the creation of this process, and we need to change it overall. I'm for it.
Joy, when is the book coming? That's what I want.
So now you're joining my husband in this call where he's just like, listen, if these random people have books, I need a book on the shelf for my wife.
I am all with your husband, especially for the random people, because I feel like there are a lot of people out here who are writing books and getting big checks and putting out information out there that is, I don't want to say false, but here's one of the things that I like about you. You always stay in your lane, right? You know this is what you do, this is what you are a master at, and that's what you give. You don't veer off and try to do this and try to do this, and you're not trying to be, the master of all of these things. And I think that when it comes to, what your civic duty is, and talking about, voting and Electoral College, as well as what you should be doing out there and educating people, you need to put this in written form. Because I think that a lot of people who don't get the opportunity to always, I listen to you guys pretty often because I have Sirius, but there's a lot of people who don't have access to Sirius, need to see that in a way. And I just also think that it'll catapult you into a world that you deserve to be in. When I hear El Joy, I also put that same, name in everybody else, up here.
Well, so, if I have a minute, I want to say something about that quickly, because you mentioned about staying in your lane, and I tweeted something about this recently. As someone who grew up in an environment in which all of my interests were nurtured, I do find it a bit difficult in this space where we are, in terms of how people like this branding marketing piece that we are in now, where you have to be branded as this one thing, and that's the only thing that you can be known for. And I do find myself struggling a bit, not all the time, but struggling a bit on this. Yes, I agree with you that me and my desire to be America's civics teacher, I stay in that lane and trying to bolster that, to be able to teach and inspire people to get engaged in that way. But I'm also a Gen X kid, right? So I have way more interest and sort of abilities. I was raised up in that ability of, you need to know a little bit of everything. and know how to do a little bit of everything in terms of being able to think your way through things as well. And so, I don't know if you can actually see it in my background. Like my latest hobby interest is like in 3D printing and sort of, learning that I'm a huge tech, like person in all different aspects. And that's everything from 3D printing to now having a studio in my house and a workshop and things like that. But I do, and that's a question I guess I have for you. I don't know if you are Gen Xers or not, but if you had that sort of same experience in terms of which all your interests were nurtured and various, rather than where I feel like some, whether it's kids or folks now, are saying you have to brand yourself this one way and that's the only thing that you can have interest in, sort of follow from there.
I don't think that that's the only thing you can have interest in, but I think that from a branding perspective, when I think about people who are branded, I know what I'm going for these particular people for, right? So I'm just going to take the serious, let me just take Urban View for example. I know when I listen to Karen, I know exactly what I'm going to get. I know exactly why I'm tuning into her and Joe Madison. When I tune into, the Momentum Advisors, I know exactly what I'm going to get. That's the reason why I go there. The same thing when I tune into you. So I think that, you making yourself this particular brand doesn't mean that you can't still have these other interests. But I think that when it comes to civics, that's just you got that covered. My other thing is I need the book, and then are we going to do something with the fashion or what?
And I just want to
this homework, boy.
Right. You know what's interesting is that I don't know if I told this story on the show before, but like, so how people ask you, what did you want to be when you grew up? So when I was younger, my whole focus, like my entire family knew this, like this was the thing. I was going to be the first senator / fashion designer. Like that was like my whole thing. I was going to become a fashion designer and get wealthy so that I could run for Senate and then be a senator. Because I, again, at a young age knew that, in order to be a senator, I have to be wealthy, right? Like in terms of that piece. But that was my whole trajectory. Like I would, I used to make my own clothes. I went from like making my dog clothes to making my own clothes. I wanted to go to FIT. I got into FIT high school, but not in the college. Like that was my whole trajectory. So politics was always, and community engagement was always like in my makeup, even as a child, and the fashion thing. But I was going to be the first fashion designer / senator. That was that was what I wanted to be when I was 11.
Hopefully, by the next time that we talk to you, we'll have one of those jumped off pieces, or we could put that. We could put a little Sunday Civics gear, on the website.
Yeah. So can I write the foreword or the preface for the book? I'm just saying.
Oh my gosh.
I'm putting my pitch in right now. Or I could just write the last page.
That's left for the husband, Maynard. That's for
right.
The husband.
Exactly. No, that's gonna be left for Laria, I think. So,
yeah.
Joy, thank you so very much for joining us. We truly appreciate you. We're always honored, when you are on. I don't know how we always connect with you when you are on vacation and you got bigger things to do than this small little bitty podcast, but we
if I say it too loud, three black guys took off. It's like vacation.
Right.
Can you do so? Yeah.
Right. So be safe. Give our love to June and to Laria. You guys keep doing what you are doing on Sunday mornings at 10 a.m. on Urban View 126. I am a fan. I listen, pretty regularly. So continue what you're doing. Continue doing what you're doing with Sunday Civics, and continue to grow and continue to just spread this knowledge, with everybody else. We look forward to whoever the next candidate is going to be, that you're going to work on and strategize with. We'll be supporting who that is. We were a little, when we heard about Cynthia, we were like, Cynthia.
But you have to listen. You have to listen to the show I did of what happens when you lose. Like what just because you lost doesn't mean you need to take your toys and go home. Absolutely. Like there are other things that you can identify that you accomplish within your race. And this is for anybody who runs for anything, and thinking critically about, what did you accomplish within the race, and sort of did it help move certain things forward? And maybe you need to run again, but then some of you need not run again. Listen to the show.
The presumptive Democratic nominee has ran a couple of times and lost a couple of times, and he's still out here swinging. So Never give up is that motto. So
but some of you
enjoy your day. Thank you. Or I know some of y'all do.
Yo,
so have a great day. Thank you so very much, Eljoy.
Before we let you go, we love you. Come back to us again.
Yes. Absolutely.
That's the same thing I just said. That's the same
Did you
thing.
say love? Did you say love, Spud?
He had to echo what he had to get the last word, Eljoy. He had to.
I got
always.
All
That's
right.
always.
Have
Thank
a
you,
fantastic
Eljoy.
day.
All right. Thank you.
All right.